Howdy, friends. I hope y'all are well. Tonight, we're going to explore something that touches every aspect of modern life. Something so pervasive that most people don't even notice it's happening. We're going to talk about the system, how it's designed, and the countless ways it shapes, directs, and controls your behavior, often without you realizing it. Take a deep breath and settle in. Let your shoulders relax. Let your mind ease. This isn't about conspiracy theories or paranoia. This is about understanding the invisible architecture of modern society, the structures and mechanisms that guide your choices, limit your options, and influence who you become. Whether you're aware of these forces or not, they're operating in your life right now. The system isn't a single entity with a master plan. It's not a shadowy organization pulling strings behind the scenes. The system is the collection of institutions, incentives, norms, technologies, and power structures that shape how society functions. It's governments, corporations, financial systems, educational institutions, media, technology platforms, and cultural expectations all working together, sometimes in coordination, sometimes in conflict, but all exerting influence on your life. Tonight, we're going to explore how this system controls you, not to make you feel helpless or defeated, but to make you aware, because awareness is the first step toward agency. When you understand how you're being influenced, you can start to make more conscious choices. You can't completely escape the system. We all live within it, but you can navigate it more intentionally. So settle in, get comfortable, let your breathing slow down, and let's begin this journey into understanding how the system controls you. Now, let's start by understanding what we mean by the system and why it exists in the first place. Every society needs structure. Without some organizing principles, some shared rules and institutions, you'd have chaos. The system, at its most basic level, is how society organizes itself to function. It's how resources get distributed, how disputes get resolved, how people coordinate their activities, how knowledge gets transmitted from one generation to the next. In that sense, having a system isn't inherently bad, it's necessary. The question is, who does the system serve? What values does it prioritize? And how much control does it exert over individual lives? The modern system we live under emerged from centuries of evolution. It's shaped by capitalism, democracy in various forms, technological development, cultural traditions, historical events, and power struggles between different groups. It's not static. It changes over time, adapting to new circumstances, new technologies, new challenges. But certain features remain constant. The system tends to preserve itself. Those who benefit from current arrangements have incentive and ability to maintain them. The system tends to expand its reach, finding new areas of life to regulate, monetize, or influence. And the system tends to shape individuals to fit its needs, rather than adapting to fit individual needs. Control is built into the system at multiple levels. There's overt control through laws, regulations, and enforcement. If you break the law, you face consequences. Fines, imprisonment, loss of rights. This is visible control that everyone understands. But most control is subtler than that. It operates through incentives that shape your choices, social norms that define what's acceptable, information flows that determine what you know and believe, economic structures that limit your options, and cultural narratives that influence your values and aspirations. You're controlled not primarily through force, though force is always there as a backstop, but through the architecture of choice. The system shapes what options are available to you, what information you have access to, what behaviors are rewarded or punished, what seems normal or deviant, what feels possible or impossible. This is sophisticated control. It makes you feel like you're making free choices while actually operating within carefully constructed boundaries. You can choose any path you want, as long as it's one of the paths the system has laid out for you. The genius of modern control is that it's often invisible. You don't feel controlled because you're making choices. You're deciding where to work, what to buy, how to spend your time. But those choices have been shaped by forces you're barely aware of, if at all. Now, let's explore one of the most fundamental ways the system controls you, through the structure of work and economic necessity. Most people must work to survive. You need money for food, shelter, health care, all the basics of life. This necessity gives employers tremendous power over you. You need the job more than any individual job needs you. This power imbalance is foundational to how the system operates. The 40-hour work week, or more realistically for many people, the 50 or 60-hour work week, structures your entire life. Your schedule revolves around work. Your energy is drained by work. Your location is determined by where work is available. Your social relationships are limited by work demands. Your sense of identity and worth becomes tied to your occupation and productivity. This wasn't inevitable. The 40-hour work week was fought for by labor movements a century ago as a reduction from much longer hours. But it's become rigid and in many industries has actually expanded. Despite enormous increases in productivity from technology, we're working as much or more than previous generations. Why? Because the system benefits from your labor. Corporations profit from your work. Your consumption, funded by your wages, drives economic growth. Your busyness keeps you from questioning the system or organizing to change it. An exhausted, time-starved population is easier to control than one with abundant leisure to think, organize, and act collectively. The precarity of modern work amplifies this control. Job security has eroded. Many people work gig jobs, contract positions, or jobs that could be eliminated at any moment. This insecurity makes you compliant. You don't push back against unreasonable demands because you're afraid of losing your job. You accept worsening conditions because something is better than nothing. Benefits tied to employment is another control mechanism, particularly in countries like the United States where health care is employer provided. You can't leave a job you hate because you'd lose health insurance. You can't start a business or pursue a passion because you need those benefits. Employment becomes a golden handcuff situation where you're trapped by the very benefits meant to attract you. The need to constantly update skills and remain employable is another form of control. Technology changes, industries evolve, and you must keep learning new things just to remain viable in the job market. This lifelong learning sounds positive, but it means you're constantly anxious about obsolescence, constantly spending time and money on training, constantly proving your value to employers. Debt is perhaps the most powerful control mechanism in the economic system. If you have student loans, mortgage debt, car payments, credit card debt, you cannot afford to take risks. You cannot quit a job without something lined up. You cannot protest or organize if it might threaten your income. You must remain compliant because the alternative is financial catastrophe. The system encourages debt. Higher education requires it for most people. Home ownership requires it. Even basic consumption is financed through credit. You're encouraged to borrow for cars, furniture, vacations, everything. This debt then controls your behavior for years or decades, ensuring you remain a productive, compliant worker. The consumption treadmill keeps you working. Your wages allow you to consume, but you're encouraged to consume at or beyond your means. As your income increases, your consumption increases to match. You never quite get ahead. You're always working to fund your current lifestyle, always 1 or 2 paychecks away from trouble. This isn't accidental. Advertising, social pressure, product design, all of it is engineered to keep you consuming. And as long as you're consuming, you need to keep earning, which means you need to keep working, which means you remain under the control of employers and the economic system. Retirement is dangled as the eventual escape, but it requires decades of compliant work. You save a portion of your income, invested in financial markets you don't control and barely understand, and hope that in 30 or 40 years you'll have enough to stop working. This promise of future freedom ensures present compliance. And for many people, retirement never truly comes. The age keeps getting pushed back. Savings prove insufficient. Healthcare costs in old age wipe out decades of savings. You work far longer than you planned. And even in retirement, you're anxious about money, careful about spending, unable to truly relax because the system never quite let go. Now let's talk about education and how the system uses schooling to shape individuals to fit its needs. Education is compulsory in most developed countries. Children must attend school for roughly 12 years. This is presented as being for their benefit, to give them knowledge and skills. And education does provide real benefits. But it also serves the system's needs in ways rarely discussed. Schools teach compliance from an early age. Children learn to sit still, follow instructions, respect authority, work on schedules determined by others, and accept that their time isn't their own. These aren't just side effects of education. They're core functions of how schools operate. The structure of schooling mirrors the structure of employment. You arrive at a set time. You go where you're told. You work on what you're assigned. You ask permission for basic needs like using the bathroom. Your performance is constantly evaluated. You're rewarded for compliance and punished for deviation. This prepares you for a lifetime of employment where the same patterns continue. Schools aren't just teaching subjects. They're teaching you how to be a worker, how to accept hierarchy, how to internalize schedules and deadlines, how to derive identity from performance and grades. The content of education also shapes you. What subjects are taught and how they're taught reflects what the system values. Math and science are emphasized because they're useful for technical work. Reading and writing are taught to a level adequate for following instructions and filling out forms, but critical analysis is often underdeveloped. History is taught in ways that generally support existing power structures. You learn about national greatness, the wisdom of founders, the inevitability of current systems. Alternative histories, stories of resistance, critiques of power, these are minimized or omitted. You're given a narrative that makes the current system seem natural, just, and permanent. Standardization in education is about producing predictable, interchangeable workers. Everyone learns the same things at the same pace in the same way. Individual interests, learning styles, and pace are subordinated to the need for standardized output. Tests measure how well you've conformed to expectations, not how well you think or how creative you are. Higher education extends these patterns while adding enormous debt. College is presented as necessary for success, which for many careers it functionally is because employers require degrees. But college is increasingly expensive, requiring most students to take on substantial debt. This debt, as discussed earlier, becomes a powerful control mechanism for decades. It also teaches you that your education is a commodity you've purchased, an investment in your future earning potential. Learning becomes transactional rather than intrinsic. You're not exploring ideas for their own sake. You're acquiring credentials to sell to employers. The hidden curriculum of education includes teaching you your place in the social hierarchy. Wealthy children attend well-funded schools, receive extensive support, and are directed toward prestigious colleges and high-status careers. Poor children attend underfunded schools, receive minimal support, and are tracked toward vocational training or low-wage work. Education is supposed to be the great equalizer and the path to upward mobility, and for some individuals it is. But statistically, education more often reinforces existing class structures than disrupts them. The system uses education to sort people into different tiers and then provides ideological justification for that sorting. If you're successful, you earned it through your education. If you're struggling, you should have tried harder in school. Now, let's explore how the system controls you through media and information flows. What you know shapes what you think, believe, and do. Controlling information is therefore a powerful form of control. In the modern system, information control happens not primarily through censorship, though that exists, but through more subtle mechanisms. Media concentration means that most of the information you consume comes from a small number of large corporations. These corporations have interests and biases that influence what stories get covered, how they're framed, what questions get asked, and what perspectives are presented as legitimate. You might feel like you have unlimited information at your fingertips through the internet, and in some ways you do. But the information you actually encounter is heavily filtered by algorithms, platform policies, and economic incentives that have nothing to do with truth or public interest. News media relies on advertising revenue, which means they need to attract audience and please advertisers. This creates incentives toward sensationalism, toward covering what's dramatic rather than what's important, toward not offending powerful interests who might pull advertising. Political coverage focuses on conflict and personality rather than policy substance. You hear about politicians' gaffes and polls, but get minimal analysis of actual legislative content or its impacts. This keeps you engaged as entertainment, but poorly informed as a citizen. Economic coverage tends to frame issues from the perspective of investors and business owners rather than workers. Stock market performance is treated as the measure of economic health, even though most people don't own significant stocks. Whether workers have secure jobs, livable wages, and good conditions is treated as secondary. The Overton window is the range of ideas considered acceptable to discuss in mainstream discourse. Ideas outside this window are dismissed as extreme, radical, or unrealistic. The system maintains control partly by keeping certain ideas outside the window, making them seem impossible even when they work well in other countries. Universal health care, for instance, works in most developed countries and is popular where it exists. But in the United States, it's often presented as radical or unfeasible. The Overton window has been positioned such that the status quo seems like the only realistic option, even though alternatives exist and function. Social media has changed information flows but hasn't necessarily democratized them. Platforms like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok shape what you see through algorithmic curation. The algorithms are optimized for engagement, which means controversial, emotional, and outrage-inducing content gets promoted over nuanced, informative content. This creates filter bubbles where you primarily see information that confirms your existing beliefs. You're not exposed to diverse perspectives or challenging information. Your worldview becomes more rigid and polarized. This serves the system by fragmenting the population into separate realities that can't coordinate to challenge power. Surveillance capitalism means that tech companies collect enormous amounts of data about you. What you search for, what you click on, what you buy, where you go, who you communicate with, all of this is tracked, analyzed, and used to influence your behavior. This information is used to sell you products through micro-targeted advertising. But it's also used to influence your beliefs, your political views, your sense of what's normal or possible. You're being constantly nudged in directions that benefit those who control the data and the platforms. Disinformation and propaganda have become sophisticated. State actors and political operatives can create fake accounts, spread misleading content, and manipulate public opinion at scale. You can't always tell what's real and what's manufactured. This confusion serves those in power by making truth seem unknowable and making people cynical about all information. The attention economy treats your attention as the scarce resource to be captured and monetized. Every platform, every media outlet, every advertiser is competing for your attention. They use psychological tricks, addictive design, constant notifications, autoplay features, infinite scrolling, anything to keep you engaged. This fragments your attention and makes deep thinking difficult. You're constantly distracted, constantly switching between inputs, never fully present or fully focused. This mental state makes you less likely to question the system because you're not thinking deeply about anything. Now, let's talk about how the system uses law and the justice system as mechanisms of control. Laws are presented as neutral rules that apply equally to everyone. But the reality is more complex. What behaviors are criminalized, how laws are enforced, and how justice is administered all reflect and reinforce existing power structures. The drug war is a clear example. Marijuana use is similar across racial groups, but Black Americans are arrested and imprisoned for marijuana offenses at dramatically higher rates than white Americans. This isn't because of different behavior. It's because of how laws are enforced and who gets targeted. This selective enforcement serves multiple control functions. It removes large numbers of Black men from their communities through incarceration. It disenfranchises them, as felons lose voting rights in many states. It makes them less employable after release. It disrupts families and communities. And it sends a message about who the system is designed to control. Poverty is effectively criminalized in many ways. Homelessness is illegal in many cities. You can't sleep in public spaces, can't panhandle, can't camp. If you're poor and experiencing homelessness, simply existing becomes illegal. You're constantly subject to harassment, arrest, and having your possessions confiscated. Traffic enforcement is often a revenue generation system that disproportionately impacts poor people. Fines for minor violations can be hundreds of dollars. If you can't pay, more fines and penalties accumulate. Eventually, you might have your license suspended, which makes it illegal to drive, which you might have to do anyway to get to work, which subjects you to more fines and possibly jail. This creates debt traps where poor people end up owing thousands of dollars for minor initial violations, with the government using the justice system as a debt collection mechanism. And when you have outstanding warrants for unpaid fines, any interaction with police becomes dangerous. A routine traffic stop could result in arrest. The cash bail system is another mechanism that punishes poverty. If you're arrested, you can pay bail to be released while awaiting trial, or you sit in jail. Wealthy people pay bail and go home. Poor people sit in jail for weeks or months, losing jobs, housing, and custody of children, all before being convicted of any crime. This pressure leads many poor people to plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit just to get out of jail. They're told that if they plead guilty, they can leave today. But if they fight the charges, they might sit in jail for months before trial. Even if you're innocent, the choice is obvious when you're desperate. Plea bargaining means that 95% of criminal cases never go to trial. Prosecutors have enormous power to threaten severe charges if you don't plead guilty to lesser ones. This creates a system where guilt or innocence barely matters. What matters is the relative power of prosecution versus defense and your ability to endure pretrial detention. Public defenders are overwhelmed, handling far too many cases to give any individual case proper attention. Wealthy people can hire attorneys who will actually fight for them. Poor people get attorneys who have 15 minutes to review their case before advising them to take a plea deal. This isn't justice. It's processing people through a system as efficiently as possible. Incarceration rates in countries like the United States are extraordinary compared to other developed nations. This isn't because Americans are more criminal. It's because the system criminalizes more behaviors and imprisons more people for longer sentences, particularly for drug offenses and poverty-related crimes. Incarceration serves as social control. It removes people from communities. It disrupts organizing and resistance. It creates a permanent underclass of felons who can't vote, can't access many jobs, can't get housing assistance, essentially can't participate fully in society. They're permanently marked and permanently disadvantaged. Private prisons have created a profit incentive for incarceration. Companies make money by imprisoning people. They lobby for tougher laws and longer sentences. They contract with states to maintain minimum occupancy rates, meaning states are obligated to keep prisons full. The system literally profits from putting human beings in cages. Now, let's explore how consumer culture and advertising shape your desires and identity. You're not just a citizen or a worker in the modern system. You're primarily a consumer. Your economic function is to buy things. The system needs constant consumption to sustain economic growth. This means you need to be made into an enthusiastic, insatiable consumer. Advertising is the mechanism for creating this consumer identity. You're exposed to thousands of advertisements daily through TV, radio, internet, social media, billboards, product placement, branded content, and more. This constant barrage isn't just informing you about products. It's shaping your desires, values, and sense of self. Advertisements sell more than products. They sell lifestyles, identities, and solutions to emotional needs. You're not buying a car. You're buying freedom, status, or adventure. You're not buying makeup. You're buying confidence and attractiveness. You're not buying a phone. You're buying connection and belonging. This works by creating dissatisfaction. Advertising must make you feel that your current state is inadequate. You're not attractive enough, successful enough, happy enough, cool enough. But don't worry, consuming this product will fix that. Of course, it won't, so you'll need the next product, and the next, in an endless cycle. Planned obsolescence ensures you keep consuming. Products are designed to wear out, break, or become obsolete faster than necessary. Your phone gets slow and stops receiving updates after a few years, forcing you to buy a new one. Your printer stops working after a certain number of pages. Your clothes fall apart after a season. This isn't poor craftsmanship. It's deliberate design to ensure repeat purchases. Fashion and trends accelerate this cycle for clothing, technology, home decor, and more. Items are made obsolete not because they stop working, but because they go out of style. You're made to feel embarrassed about having last year's model or wearing last season's styles. Social pressure keeps you consuming to avoid seeming outdated or low status. Status and identity through consumption is deeply embedded in modern culture. What you own signals who you are. Drive a luxury car and you're successful. Wear designer clothes and you're fashionable. Have the latest tech and you're modern and savvy. Your possessions become your identity, which means you must keep consuming to maintain your sense of self. This is profitable for the system but corrosive for individuals and society. People go into debt to maintain appearances. They work jobs they hate to fund lifestyles they don't enjoy. They accumulate possessions that don't bring lasting satisfaction. And they're on a hedonic treadmill where each purchase provides a brief hit of dopamine before dissatisfaction returns. Children are targeted by advertising from very young ages. They're taught to be consumers before they can read. Cartoon characters sell products. Toys are designed to hook children into collect-them-all franchises. Children's programming is essentially long advertisements interrupted by shorter advertisements. This creates lifelong consumers who never learned any other way of relating to the world. As adults, they automatically reach for consumption as the solution to any problem or emotional need. Bored? Buy something. Sad? Buy something. Stressed? Buy something. The system has trained them well. Social media has turned ordinary people into advertisers and brands. You curate your life to present an aspirational image to others. You become a walking advertisement for products, experiences, and lifestyles. Your worth is measured in likes, follows, and engagement. You've internalized the logic of the market, commodifying yourself and your relationships. Influencer culture takes this further. Some people make careers out of presenting aspirational lifestyles and promoting products. Their followers try to emulate them, buying the products they promote, imitating their style, consuming as a form of identity construction. The boundaries between advertising and content have dissolved entirely. Now, let's talk about how technology and digital platforms exert control over your life. Smartphones have become extensions of ourselves. We carry them everywhere, check them constantly, feel anxious without them. This connectivity keeps us accessible to employers, to social demands, to information flows at all times. There's no true downtime anymore, no space that's entirely our own. The design of technology is not neutral. Every feature, every interface choice, every default setting reflects decisions about how your behavior should be shaped. These decisions are made by companies whose interests are engagement and profit, not your well-being or autonomy. Notification systems are designed to be addictive. Every ping, every buzz creates a small hit of anticipation. What is it? Who's reaching out? You can't resist checking. This fragments your attention and makes you constantly reactive rather than proactive, constantly responding to external stimuli rather than directing your own focus. Infinite scroll and autoplay keep you engaged longer than you intended. You meant to check one thing, but the design makes it frictionless to keep going. Before you know it, you've lost an hour. This isn't a personal failing. It's the intended result of intentional design choices by people who studied psychology to figure out how to keep you hooked. Algorithmic feeds show you content optimized for engagement, not for your benefit. The algorithm doesn't care if you're happy or healthy. It cares that you keep scrolling, keep clicking, keep coming back. If outrage keeps you engaged, you'll see outrageous content. If fear keeps you engaged, you'll see frightening content. This shapes your worldview. If the algorithm determines that you engage with political content that confirms your biases, that's what you'll see. Your feed becomes an echo chamber that doesn't reflect reality, but reflects what keeps you engaged. You become more polarized, more certain, more tribal, all while thinking you're simply seeing what's happening in the world. Data collection happens constantly. Your location, your contacts, your communications, your browsing history, your purchases, your health data, all of it is collected, analyzed, and used. This data is ostensibly to improve services and personalize experiences, but it's really to predict and influence your behavior in ways that profit the platforms and their clients. You've never consented to this in any meaningful sense. The terms of service are incomprehensible legal documents that no one reads. You click agree because you have to if you want to use the service, not because you understand or truly consent to what you're agreeing to. Platform dependency makes it hard to leave. All your photos are on Google. All your professional network is on LinkedIn. All your friends are on Facebook. Leaving means losing access to all of that. The platform holds your data, your relationships, your memories hostage. You're locked in, even if you're unhappy with how the platform operates. Digital architecture shapes what's possible. You can only do what the platform allows. Want to organize a community? You'll do it on Facebook, under their rules, subject to their moderation, generating value for them. Want to share creative work? You'll do it on YouTube or Instagram according to their algorithms, which might or might not show your work to people. The platforms mediate more and more of life. Dating happens on apps. Shopping happens online. Socializing happens through screens. Learning happens through platforms. Each mediating platform takes a cut, enforces rules, shapes behavior, and extracts data. You're increasingly living through digital intermediaries rather than experiencing life directly. Deskilling happens as technology does more for you. GPS means you don't learn directions. Spell check means you don't learn spelling. Algorithms curate your entertainment so you don't develop taste. Calculators mean you don't do mental math. Each convenience makes you slightly more dependent on the technology and slightly less capable without it. Gig economy platforms like Uber, DoorDash, TaskRabbit, and Instacart have created a new form of precarious work where the platform controls everything but bears no responsibility for workers. You're an independent contractor, so you have no benefits, no job security, no protections, but you can't set your own rates or terms. The platform does that. The platform tracks your every action, rates you constantly, and can deactivate you at any time for any reason. You have no recourse, no due process, no way to appeal or challenge. The algorithm is judge, jury, and executioner. This is a new form of corporate control enabled by technology. Now, let's explore how cultural norms and social expectations control behavior. Not all control comes from institutions and systems. Much of it comes from culture, the shared beliefs, values, and norms that define what's acceptable and what's not. Culture is internalized. You police your own behavior based on social expectations, often without realizing it. Gender norms define how men and women should behave, dress, speak, and what roles they should occupy. These norms are enforced through socialization from birth, through media representations, through peer pressure, and through real consequences for violation. Step outside gender norms and you face ridicule, ostracism, discrimination, or violence. These norms serve the system by maintaining certain power structures and channeling people into prescribed roles. Women are expected to do more unpaid domestic and emotional labor. Men are expected to suppress emotion and prioritize work. These patterns benefit the economic system while harming individuals who don't fit or who sacrifice their authentic selves to conform. Body norms dictate what bodies are acceptable, attractive, healthy, or professional. Thinness for women, muscularity for men, youth for everyone, ability, conventional attractiveness, these are enforced through constant messaging. Bodies that don't conform are marginalized, discriminated against, and made to feel inadequate. The beauty and diet industries profit enormously from these norms. If everyone felt fine about their bodies, entire industries would collapse. So the norms must be maintained and reinforced. You must be made to feel that your body is wrong, so you'll buy products and services to fix it. Success narratives define what a successful life looks like. College, career, home ownership, marriage, children, retirement, this is the prescribed path. Deviate from it and you're seen as immature, irresponsible, or unfortunate. This limits imagination about alternative ways of living. These narratives serve the system by channeling people into economically productive patterns. College means debt that controls you. Career means decades of compliant labor. Home ownership means mortgage debt and reduced mobility. All of it keeps you locked into the system, working and consuming as expected. Professionalism codes govern how you present yourself in work contexts. Certain clothes are professional, others aren't. Certain speech is professional, others isn't. Certain hairstyles are professional, others aren't. These codes tend to reflect and reinforce race and class hierarchies. Professional means conforming to upper-middle-class white norms. This requires many people to code switch, to present differently at work than they do in their own communities. It's exhausting and alienating to constantly modify yourself to meet expectations that don't reflect your authentic identity. But it's necessary to access economic opportunity. Social comparison is constant and toxic. You compare yourself to peers, to people you see on social media, to cultural ideals. Am I successful enough? Attractive enough? Happy enough? These comparisons are usually upward toward people who seem better off, which makes you feel inadequate. This inadequacy serves the system by driving consumption. Buy things to improve yourself. Compliance, work harder to achieve more, and by preventing solidarity, you're competing with others rather than coordinating with them. A population engaged in constant social comparison is less likely to recognize shared interests and organize collectively. Taboos prevent certain topics from being discussed openly. Sex, money, politics, religion, mental health. These are often taboo in polite conversation. This fragmentation means people don't share experiences, don't realize how common their struggles are, and don't develop collective consciousness about shared problems. The system benefits from these taboos. If you don't talk about your salary, you don't realize you're underpaid. If you don't talk about your mental health, you think you're uniquely broken. If you don't talk about politics, you don't organize. Taboos keep problems individual rather than social, private rather than political. Shame is a powerful control mechanism. Shame about your body, your financial situation, your desires, your failures, your needs. Shame keeps you isolated, prevents you from seeking help, makes you feel that your struggles are personal failings rather than systemic issues. The system uses shame liberally. Poor, you should be ashamed you're lazy. Unemployed, ashamed you're not trying hard enough. In debt, ashamed you're irresponsible. Struggling with mental health, ashamed you're weak. Every systemic problem is reframed as individual failure, and shame keeps you from challenging that framing. Now, let's talk about how the political system manages to maintain the appearance of democracy while limiting actual popular power. Elections create the illusion of choice and popular sovereignty. You get to vote, which makes you feel that you're participating in governance, that your voice matters, that the system is accountable to you. But the reality is more constrained. The choices available to you have been pre-selected through primary processes, party structures, and most importantly, through money. Running for office requires enormous funding. This funding comes primarily from wealthy donors and corporate interests. By the time you get to vote, you're choosing between candidates who've all been vetted by money. This means that regardless of which candidate wins, they're more responsive to donors than to voters. They need those donors for the next election. They need to maintain relationships with wealthy and corporate interests. Your vote gives legitimacy to the system, but the actual policy outcomes are determined more by money than by votes. Two-party systems in countries like the United States create false binaries. You're presented with two options and told to pick one. This makes politics seem like a simple choice between two alternatives rather than a spectrum of possibilities. Ideas outside the two-party consensus seem unrealistic or impossible, even when they're popular and feasible. The two parties often agree on fundamental issues that benefit power and wealth. They might disagree on social issues, which are real and important, but they agree on maintaining corporate power, on military spending, on protecting Wall Street, on enforcing property rights, on the basic structure of the economic system. The narrow window of disagreement makes the broad consensus invisible. Gerrymandering means that politicians choose their voters rather than voters choosing their politicians. District lines are drawn to predetermine outcomes, to pack opposition voters into a few districts or split them across many, ensuring that one party wins regardless of overall vote totals. This makes many votes meaningless and entrenches incumbents. Voter suppression takes many forms. Strict ID requirements, limited polling places in certain neighborhoods, purges of voter rolls, restrictions on mail voting, laws that make registration difficult. All of these reduce participation, particularly among poor, young, and minority voters who tend to challenge existing power structures. The Electoral College in the United States means that presidential elections aren't actually decided by popular vote. You can win the popular vote by millions and lose the election. This violates basic democratic principles, but serves to protect the power of certain geographical regions and ideological perspectives. Money as speech is the legal doctrine that allows unlimited political spending. Wealthy individuals and corporations can spend infinite amounts to influence elections, which drowns out ordinary voices. The Supreme Court has enshrined this in law, declaring that spending money to influence politics is protected speech that cannot be limited. This makes democracy increasingly plutocratic. Those with money have massively more influence than those without. Policy outcomes reflect the preferences of the wealthy much more than the preferences of the general population. Studies have shown that popular opinion has essentially zero impact on policy unless it aligns with elite opinion. Lobbying is legalized corruption. Corporations and wealthy interests employ lobbyists who have close relationships with legislators, who draft actual bill language, who provide campaign contributions, who offer future job opportunities to officials who cooperate. This institutionalized influence peddling means laws are written by and for those with resources to lobby. Regulatory capture means that regulatory agencies meant to oversee industries are often controlled by those industries. Executives move between industry and regulatory roles. Agencies rely on industry expertise and cooperation. Regulations are written to benefit incumbents, not to protect public interest. The fox is guarding the henhouse. The revolving door between government and corporate sectors ensures alignment of interests. Politicians and officials know they can have lucrative private sector jobs after leaving office if they're cooperative. This future payoff influences current behavior. Why antagonize industries you'll want to work for later? Think tanks and policy organizations are funded by wealthy interests and corporations. They produce research, policy proposals, and talking points that serve their funders. These get laundered as neutral expertise and influence policy debates. The range of policy ideas considered feasible is constrained by what powerful interests are willing to fund and promote. Political theater distracts from actual power. Manufactured controversies, culture war battles, personality conflicts, all of this dominates political coverage while the actual business of policymaking happens quietly in the background. You're focused on whatever outrageous thing a politician said while corporate lobbyists are writing the tax code. This serves power by keeping you engaged with politics as spectacle rather than substance. You feel politically engaged because you're following the news and having opinions, but you're not actually participating in or influencing the decisions that most affect your life. Protest is permitted but contained. You can march, chant, hold signs, and express your views. But these activities have been largely domesticated. Protests happen in designated areas, with permits, policed by authorities. They create the appearance of dissent while rarely threatening actual power. When protests do become effective, when they actually disrupt business as usual, they're met with repression. Police violence, mass arrests, surveillance, infiltration by provocateurs, these tactics break movements and deter participation. The message is clear. You can protest as long as it's ineffective. Now, let's explore how the healthcare system controls you, particularly in countries where healthcare is commodified. Health insurance tied to employment, as discussed earlier, is a massive control mechanism. You can't leave your job without losing coverage. You can't take risks or pursue alternatives because you need those benefits. Your health, perhaps the most fundamental personal need, is held hostage to your employment status. Medical debt is another powerful control tool. Healthcare costs are astronomical and often unpredictable. Insurance has high deductibles and co-pays. A medical emergency can bankrupt you even if you have insurance. This financial precarity around health keeps you compliant and desperate. The fear of medical costs influences behavior in profound ways. You delay or avoid medical care because you can't afford it. You stay in jobs you hate for insurance. You don't start businesses or pursue dreams because you need employer coverage. Your entire life trajectory is shaped by healthcare insecurity. Pharmaceutical companies profit from chronic illness. Their business model depends on treatment rather than cure. A cured patient is a customer lost. A patient who needs daily medication forever is a revenue stream. This creates perverse incentives where keeping you sick but managing your symptoms is more profitable than making you well. Drug pricing is extortionate in countries without price controls. Medications that cost pennies to produce are sold for hundreds or thousands of dollars. People ration insulin, skip doses, or go without medication because they can't afford it. The system values profit over human life. The complexity of healthcare is deliberately maintained. Insurance systems are incomprehensible. Bills are indecipherable. You can't know what something will cost before receiving care. Networks, deductibles, co-pays, co-insurance, out-of-pocket maximums. The terminology itself is designed to confuse. This complexity makes it impossible to be an informed consumer, even though healthcare is increasingly framed as a market where you should shop around. You can't shop effectively when you don't know prices, when you're often making decisions under emergency conditions, when your choices are limited by network restrictions, and when you lack the medical expertise to evaluate care quality. Medical professionals are often trapped by the system too. Doctors want to help patients but are constrained by insurance regulations, by time pressures, by threat of malpractice, by pressure to generate revenue. They spend more time on paperwork than on patient care. Many are burned out and demoralized. This isn't because doctors are bad people. It's because the system is structured to prioritize profit over care. Hospitals are increasingly corporate-owned and run like businesses. Metrics are revenue-focused. Patients are units to process. Care quality is secondary to financial performance. Mental health care is particularly inadequate in most systems. It's stigmatized, poorly covered by insurance, and in short supply. People who need help can't access it or can't afford it. This untreated mental illness makes people less able to challenge the system, less able to organize, less able to function in resistance. This may not be intentional, but it's certainly convenient. A population struggling with untreated anxiety, depression, and trauma is easier to control than one that's psychologically healthy and robust. Mental health care inadequacy serves the system, even if that's not its stated purpose. Now, let's talk about how the housing market and landlord system exert control. Housing is a fundamental need, but it's treated as a commodity and investment vehicle. This creates a conflict of interest. For housing to be a good investment, prices must rise. But rising prices make housing less affordable for people who need homes to live in. The system prioritizes investors over residents. Home ownership requires massive debt for most people. A mortgage is typically the largest debt you'll ever have, lasting 20 or 30 years. This debt controls your life for decades. You can't easily move. You can't take career risks. You must maintain income to keep the house. The house owns you as much as you own it. But home ownership is still better than renting for building wealth, which is why it's seen as the dream. Renters build no equity. Rent increases eat up any wage gains. You can be evicted with little notice. You have minimal control over your living situation. Landlords can raise rent, sell the building, or decide not to renew your lease. This insecurity keeps renters compliant. You can't cause trouble or assert rights because you might lose your housing. You accept poor conditions because alternatives are worse or non-existent. Your landlord has tremendous power over you because housing is non-optional. Housing costs have increased far faster than wages. In many cities, rent takes 50% or more of income for average workers. This is unsustainable and keeps people in poverty. But it's very profitable for landlords and real estate investors. Your housing crisis is their investment opportunity. Homelessness is criminalized rather than addressed. If you can't afford housing, you're not provided with housing. You're criminalized for existing in public space. Sweeps destroy your possessions. Arrests give you a record that makes housing even harder to find. The system punishes you for the failure it created. This serves as a threat to everyone else. See what happens if you can't pay rent? You end up on the street, and then you're treated as a criminal. Better stay compliant. Better keep working. Better keep paying, no matter how high rent goes or how bad conditions get. Gentrification displaces longtime residents from their communities. As neighborhoods become desirable to wealthy people, property values and rents increase. Longtime residents who built the community are priced out. This breaks community ties, displaces culture, and ensures neighborhoods serve wealth rather than residents. This isn't accidental. It's systematic. Developers and investors deliberately target certain neighborhoods, knowing they can extract value by displacing current residents with wealthier ones. The system facilitates this through zoning, tax incentives, and policies that prioritize development over existing communities. Short-term rental platforms like Airbnb have removed housing from the long-term rental market in many cities. Properties that could house residents are instead used for tourist rentals, which are more profitable. This reduces housing supply and increases prices. Your housing crisis is someone else's passive income stream. Now, let's explore how the food system controls you and affects your health. Food production has been consolidated into a small number of large corporations. These corporations control what's produced, how it's produced, and what's available in stores. Your food choices are determined by corporate decisions about profitability, not by nutrition or sustainability. Processed foods are engineered to be addictive. Food scientists optimize for bliss point, the perfect combination of salt, sugar, and fat that makes you want to keep eating. These foods are designed to override your natural satiety signals, making you consume more than you need. This isn't about making food delicious. It's about maximizing consumption. The more you eat, the more you buy, the more profit is generated. That your health suffers is externalized. The corporation profits, you pay the health costs. Healthy food is expensive. Fresh produce, quality proteins, whole foods, these cost more than processed alternatives. This creates a nutritional divide where poor people eat processed foods that make them sick, while wealthy people can afford foods that keep them healthy. This isn't natural, It's the result of agricultural subsidies that support corn and soy production, which become cheap processed food ingredients, while not supporting diverse fruit and vegetable production. Policy choices make unhealthy food cheap and healthy food expensive. Food deserts are areas without access to healthy food. In many low-income neighborhoods, there are no supermarkets, only convenience stores and fast food. Residents must travel long distances to access fresh food, which is often impossible without a car. They're forced to eat unhealthy food by geography and infrastructure choices. Marketing to children creates lifelong consumption patterns. Kids are targeted with advertising for sugary cereals, snacks, and fast food. They develop preferences and habits early that persist into adulthood. By the time they're adults capable of making informed choices, their tastes have been shaped by years of corporate marketing. The dietary guidelines and food pyramid have been influenced by industry lobbying. Recommendations about what's healthy have often reflected what's profitable for food producers rather than what's actually good for health. You're given official guidance that serves corporate interests disguised as health advice. Fast food is convenient but unhealthy. It's engineered to be quick, cheap, and tasty, but it's nutritionally poor and contributes to obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic conditions. But for people working multiple jobs, lacking time to cook, or living without kitchen facilities, it's the most accessible option. This creates a health crisis that disproportionately affects poor and working-class people. They're not choosing to be unhealthy. They're doing the best they can within a system that makes healthy living difficult and expensive while making unhealthy living easy and cheap. Chronic disease from poor diet benefits the medical pharmaceutical system. Diabetes, heart disease, obesity-related conditions, these create lifelong patients who need medication and treatment. Your poor health, induced partly by the food system, becomes profit for the healthcare system. Now, let's talk about how the system controls your time and schedules. The 40-hour work week structures your entire existence. 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, plus commute time, plus time to prepare for work. You're given most of your waking hours to employment. The time that's supposedly yours, evenings and weekends, is often spent recovering from work, preparing for work, or too exhausted to do anything meaningful. This leaves minimal time for political organizing, community building, personal development, creative pursuits, or even just rest. You're too busy surviving to question the system or organize to change it. Your time poverty is a feature, not a bug. Commute time is uncompensated but required. If you live an hour from work, that's 2 hours per day, 10 hours per week, over 500 hours per year spent traveling for your employer's benefit, unpaid. This time is dead time, neither work nor leisure, just lost to the demands of the system. The always-on culture enabled by technology means you're never truly off. Emails, messages, calls, these intrude into evenings, weekends, vacations. You're expected to be responsive at all times. This makes rest impossible and keeps you in a constant state of partial work readiness. Busyness has become a status symbol. If you're not busy, you're not important or successful. This cultural norm means people don't admit to having free time or ease. Everyone is busy, stressed, overcommitted. This makes it socially unacceptable to prioritize rest or to refuse additional commitments. The schedule itself is about control. You arrive at set times, leave at set times, take breaks when allowed, work on what you're assigned. Your time is not your own. Someone else determines how you spend the majority of your waking hours. This is the fundamental condition of employment. Sick time and vacation are rationed and insufficient. You get a certain number of days off per year, which you must request in advance, and which can be denied. You're supposed to compress all illness and all need for rest into this small allocation of time. The rest of the year, you must be productive. This teaches you that your needs are secondary to the organization's needs. You learn to come to work sick, to postpone rest, to ignore your body and mind signals that you need a break. You internalize the idea that productivity matters more than well-being. Unpaid labor is invisible but extensive. Commuting, as mentioned, but also emotional labor, housework, childcare, elder care, maintaining relationships, these are all necessary but uncompensated. They fall disproportionately on women and make up a second shift that happens after the paid workday ends. The system benefits from this unpaid labor. It enables paid workers to continue working by taking care of all the other necessities of life. But it's not valued, not compensated, often not even acknowledged. The time and energy it requires are treated as if they don't exist. Now, let's explore how the system controls through social isolation and the breakdown of community. Community used to provide support, meaning, and collective power. When you had strong ties to neighbors, extended family, religious community, labor unions, or other organizations, you had resources beyond the market. You could rely on others for help, for child care, for skills, for knowledge, for solidarity. The modern system has systematically broken down these community ties. Geographical mobility for work means you don't stay in one place long enough to build deep community. Suburban design isolates families in separate houses with separate yards. Long work hours leave no time for community involvement. This isolation makes you dependent on the market. Need child care? Pay for it? Need help with a project? Hire someone? Need emotional support? Pay a therapist? Everything the community once provided now must be purchased. This is profitable for service providers but impoverishing for everyone else. Isolation also makes collective action difficult. If you don't know your neighbors, you can't organize with them. If you have no community ties, you have no base for collective power. You're atomized, alone, facing the system as an individual rather than as part of a group. This is why the system doesn't mind if you complain online. Isolated individual complaints are powerless. What the system fears is organized, coordinated collective action, and that requires community, relationships, trust, and time, all of which have been systematically eroded. Social media creates the illusion of community while actually increasing isolation. You have hundreds of online friends, but may not know your neighbors. You scroll through updates about acquaintances, but have few deep relationships. The connections are shallow and don't provide the actual support that community offers. This fake community makes you feel less alone, while actually being alone. You're engaged in constant lightweight interaction that satisfies some social need while not providing actual community. And the platforms profit from your engagement while you become more isolated and atomized. The nuclear family structure isolates people further. Instead of extended families living near each other with shared resources and responsibilities, you have individual nuclear families or single people, each trying to manage everything independently. This is economically inefficient but profitable for markets. Car dependency reduces spontaneous social interaction. In walkable communities, you encounter people as you go about daily life. In car-dependent suburbs, you drive from isolated home to parking lot to isolated destination and back. You never randomly encounter neighbors or have unplanned social interactions. This reduces social cohesion and makes neighborhoods less connected. You don't know who lives near you. You don't recognize faces. You have no shared spaces where community naturally forms. This isolation is designed into the built environment. Now, as we move toward the end of our journey tonight, let's talk about resistance and what reclaiming agency looks like. The first step is always awareness. Understanding how the system controls you doesn't immediately free you, but it's necessary for any freedom. You can't resist manipulation you don't recognize. You can't reclaim agency in areas where you're unconscious of being controlled. This awareness can be uncomfortable. It's easier to believe you're making free choices than to recognize how constrained your choices actually are. But discomfort is a sign you're seeing something true. Sit with it, process it, and then consider what it means for how you want to live. Reducing consumption is a form of resistance. Every purchase you don't make is a small act of defiance against consumer culture. You're rejecting the message that buying things will make you happy or complete. You're reducing the system's hold on you by needing less from it. This doesn't mean extreme minimalism or deprivation. It means being intentional about what you actually need and want versus what you've been told to want. It means questioning desire before acting on it. It means finding satisfaction in things that can't be purchased. Building community is essential for collective power. Get to know your neighbors. Participate in local organizations. Build relationships based on mutual aid and solidarity rather than market exchange. Create networks of support that don't depend on money or institutions. This takes time and effort, which is why the system keeps you too busy for it. But it's time well spent. Strong communities are resilient to system shocks and provide collective power that individuals lack. This is why power works so hard to prevent community formation. Sharing resources reduces individual vulnerability. Tool libraries, car sharing, community gardens, childcare cooperatives, skill sharing, all of these reduce dependence on the market and build community simultaneously. You need less money when you share resources, which means you need to work less, which means you have more time for community. Political organizing is necessary for systemic change. Individual changes are good, but they're not sufficient. The system needs to be challenged and changed through collective political action. This means joining organizations, showing up to meetings, doing unglamorous organizing work, building power over time. This is hard and often frustrating. Change is slow. Victories are incremental. You'll face opposition from entrenched interests. But history shows that organized people can challenge concentrated power and sometimes win. It requires persistence, but it's possible. Supporting unions and worker organizing is crucial. Labor unions are one of the few institutions that give workers collective power against employers. Strong unions mean better wages, better conditions, and more worker control. The system has worked hard to weaken unions because they're effective. If your workplace isn't unionized, consider organizing one. If it is unionized, participate actively. Union strength comes from member involvement, not just from having a union structure. Your participation strengthens collective power. Reducing debt reduces the system's control over you. This is often difficult and not always possible, but to the extent you can avoid or pay down debt, you reduce your vulnerability. Less debt means more freedom to take risks, to say no to bad jobs, to make choices based on values rather than financial necessity. This doesn't mean never borrowing. Sometimes debt is necessary or worthwhile, but be strategic about it. Understand what control you're ceding and whether what you're getting is worth it. Developing skills and self-sufficiency reduces market dependence. Learn to cook, to repair things, to grow food, to fix your computer, to mend clothes, whatever skills reduce your need to purchase services. These skills represent independence and resilience. This isn't about going off-grid or becoming completely self-sufficient, which isn't realistic for most people. It's about having a broader base of capabilities, so you're less vulnerable when systems fail, or when you can't afford market solutions. Protecting your attention is crucial. Limit social media use. Block ads where possible. Disable notifications. Create spaces in your life that aren't colonized by commercial messages or algorithmic manipulation. Your attention is valuable. Guard it carefully. This is increasingly difficult as technology becomes more intrusive and persuasive. But small choices add up. Each boundary you set, each notification you disable, each platform you quit or use less, is a small reclamation of mental space. Supporting alternative institutions and platforms when possible reduces reliance on corporate systems. Credit unions instead of banks. Cooperatives instead of corporations. Open source software instead of proprietary platforms. These alternatives often work better and serve communities rather than shareholders. This requires research and often some inconvenience. Alternative institutions are usually smaller and have fewer resources than mainstream ones, but supporting them strengthens alternatives to corporate control. Practicing mutual aid builds relationships and community while providing material support. When you help others directly, when others help you, you're creating bonds that don't depend on money or institutions. This is community and resistance simultaneously. Mutual aid isn't charity, it's solidarity. It's the recognition that we all need help sometimes, that we're interdependent, that we're stronger together. It's rejecting the individualist ideology that says you should be able to handle everything alone. Now, as we come to the end of our journey tonight, I want to leave you with some final reflections. The system is powerful, but it's not omnipotent. It has weaknesses and contradictions. It depends on your participation and compliance. Every point where it touches your life is a point where you can resist, individually or collectively. Understanding how you're controlled doesn't mean you're helpless. It means you can make more conscious choices. You can't escape the system entirely, we all live within it. But you can navigate it more intentionally. Resist where you can, and build alternatives where possible. The system wants you to feel powerless. It wants you to believe that things are the way they are because that's the way they must be. It wants you to focus on individual choices and ignore collective power. It wants you to compete with others rather than coordinate with them. Rejecting these messages is itself resistance. Recognizing your power, even when it's limited, is important. Building solidarity rather than competition challenges the system's divide and conquer strategy. Imagining alternatives expands what seems possible. Change is slow but real. The system we live under now was created by human choices and can be changed by human choices. History shows that systems that seem permanent and natural eventually transform. People organize, demand change, and sometimes win. This isn't guaranteed. Progress isn't inevitable, but it's possible. And possibility is enough to motivate action. Your individual life matters. Even if you can't change the whole system, you can change your corner of it. You can treat people with kindness, build community, live according to values rather than just market signals. These local changes are meaningful, even if they're not revolutionary. Don't let the scale of systemic problems paralyze you. Do what you can, where you are, with what you have. Connect with others doing the same. Build networks of resistance and mutual support. These small actions aggregate into larger movements. As you drift off to sleep tonight or rest in this quiet space, let go of any anxiety or despair about the system's power. Yes, it's powerful. Yes, it controls much of your life. But you're not helpless. You're aware now, and awareness changes things. Tomorrow is a new day. Tomorrow you can make different choices. Tomorrow you can build community. Tomorrow you can resist in small ways that matter. Tomorrow you can participate in organizing or support others who are organizing. The system will still be there, but you'll be more conscious of how it operates and how to respond. Sleep well tonight, releasing the weight of these realizations. Understanding the system doesn't mean carrying all its problems alone. It means seeing clearly so you can act effectively. You're part of something larger, connected to others who are also waking up, also resisting, also building alternatives. Rest now. Let your breathing slow. Let your mind settle. Let go of the need to solve everything tonight. There will be time tomorrow for action, for organizing, for resistance, for building the world you want to live in. Tonight is for rest, for integration, for simply being without the system's constant demands. You're more powerful than you've been taught to believe. You're more connected to others than the system wants you to know. You're capable of resistance, of building alternatives, of imagining and working toward different ways of living. You're not alone in seeing these patterns. You're not alone in wanting change. You're not alone in struggling against the system's control. There are millions of others, also waking up, also questioning, also working for something better. You're doing your best in systems designed to limit you. That's enough. You're aware now, and awareness is the beginning of freedom. You're going to be okay. Good night.